And joining me right now here on the Mark Moses Show podcast is my great friend, Mr. Andrew Spivey with Gator Country. And we need to recap the spring game from this past Saturday there at the Swamp and spring practice overall. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Always appreciate coming on. Let's start with this. This game was not on television. Were you there at the Swamp to see it with your own eyeballs then?
Yeah, I mean, I was. I don't know what I watched, but it was. It was just, these spring games, everyone wants to talk about, well, they're getting canceled. It doesn't matter if they're getting canceled. This is not real football being played. It's just a glorified fan performance for the most part. And you see it around the country where a lot of teams are going to just a glorified practice. The Alabama went to it as well, and several other schools are doing it as well. It wouldn't shock me if that's what Florida goes to going forward.
Okay, we have had spring games in the past, and I've known you for a long time, where they were on Thursday night or Friday night or, dude, I think I was at one under Dan Mullen where he had like alumni show up and start scoring touchdowns in the game. I don't know. There's no reason for me to drive up to Gainesville to watch this if the team is telling you openly that they don't care either. I don't know what to think anymore about spring games. How about you?
You didn't like Chris Doering and all those guys just, popping out of the stands in the end zone and catching touchdowns and, it counting. Granted, it's, entertaining, but it's not what it is. And, Billy Napier said that, one of the reasons they didn't do the spring game on TV was they weren't going to get a primetime spot. And so he thought, well, if we don't do TV at all, it'll get more people to come into the stands and want to see it in person. In reality, that wasn't the case. Maybe you thought that would be the case, but that wasn't the case. The reason the Swamp had what it had is the basketball team, and we could talk about that later because that was a disappointment. But once this spring started and you said DJ Lagway wasn't going to play, you heard every chance to have a sold-out Swamp on Saturday.
Are teams afraid to show off their players because they might lose them to the transfer portal? That's what I keep hearing, the cliche comment. Is that what's happening now in the world of college football?
I mean, you can say that, but in reality, everybody knows what everybody has. And, it's the same port of not having it on TV. Guess what? If the third-string quarterback at Florida has a great spring, don't think for a second his circle, his agents, his parents, him, whatever, aren't sending video to every team across the country. So, yes, it doesn't put it on a national TV where it's openly out there, but if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and that's just the way it is. First off, you're going to have people talking about it. You're going to have people bragging about it. For instance, on Saturday, Dallas Wilson, the freshman receiver for Florida, had an absolute monster game for it. Guess what? It was all over social media. So if a walk-on player had that same performance, it's all over social media. So if, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, sees that, which he would see that, he's going to go call. And I just don't. You can't operate being scared. It is what it is. The portal's going to happen. You're going to lose guys that are going to be depth pieces. You're going to lose them. It is what it is. You're going to overpay for guys until this gets fixed. So, a guy like Dallas Wilson, for instance, he may get a bump in pay because of this. We've seen it happen in Tennessee. It's going to happen. It's the way the college football landscape or the college athletic landscape is in general. I think you can kind of make that same argument, that teams are making as the lower conferences when they played in the Big Dance in March Madness. Those guys, for instance, guys like McNeese State those guys. They're losing their top players because they played in March Madness, had good games in March Madness, so they're gone. So do you want the publicity or do you not want the publicity? You're going to get hurt either way.
You know what's weird also? So the Florida Gators Twitter account, X account, whatever you want to call it, they were putting all the big plays on Twitter anyway. And Sean Kelly, voice of the team, good dude, he's calling the plays. I'm just so confused by the whole thing. I'm just concerned consumer. I just want it on the television. Can we just make that happen moving forward, Andrew? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think you've seen the end of it. That's just me. I personally think you've seen the end of spring games in general, at least until they get things fixed. Because, A, what do you get out of it? That they're not, anybody who has a slight nick is not going to play in the game. Even if DJ's healthy, he's not playing the whole game. Even if, the game's on TV, he's not playing the whole game as healthy. So I just think that it's always been a dying breed of the spring game, like you talked about. Dan Mullen having, former players come out there. It's always been that. The real work gets done the 3 to 4 weeks beforehand, in those scrimmages beforehand. There's a lot of teams who will have the scrimmage and then have a full-on scrimmage again the next week to have a real game like atmosphere where they show everything, where they do everything. And so it's always been that way. I just think that now you're getting to the point where it's just going to be shut down, and you're even starting to see it now. And no offense to Florida at all, Florida has been pretty good about this, but we were getting 15 minutes of practice 3 days a week. At the end of the last few weeks of spring, it was one time a week, and so things are getting shut down. Everybody's paranoid, rightfully so in some ways. But again, if it's going to get out, it's going to get out.
We're here at the Gators Spivey-Gator Country. So I think we've done 12 seasons together. This is the most I have not talked spring practice with you or any other reporter, not just for the Gators, but like for all of college football, where there's no access, there's no content. I'm like, whatever. I honestly, and I want your take as a guy that covers the Gators, and you do a great job with GatorCountry.com. I just talked Gator basketball for the last 3 weeks. That's how I kind of did it. How did you tackle the last couple of weeks for Gator athletics?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's been. It's been basketball and, some recruiting because, they have had recruits on campus, during these practices. And, we've covered the press conferences and, we've had some insider reports on scrimmages and such. But, it has been a particularly dead, period per se, because there hasn't been a ton of, video being shared and that kind of stuff from that. And, and I think that in a way that kind of helped Florida football this year was having the basketball team have this run. They didn't get the spotlight put on them. They didn't get the pressure put on them of, hey, we need more. Florida State took a big hit, publicly because they shut down everything. And they didn't have anything to fall back on. Luckily for Florida, they had the basketball team all the way up until last Monday. So it is interesting. Again, and I say this all the time, spring ball's not as much of a reporting thing anyway, because it is more of just a glorified fundamental practice of getting things there. Obviously, there's always going to be guys that stand out. Obviously, there's always going to be newcomers who are doing well and some guys that, have stepped up. And I think we've been able to report that. It just hasn't been the glorified, clips of DJ throwing or Aiden Warner or Harrison Bailey, those guys throwing in. It's okay. I mean, again, in a way, it was a waste of time anyway because you were only seeing stretching and throwing. So, in a way, it is what it is.
All right, we're joined here by Andrew Spivey. We'll see what happens moving forward. We went 10 minutes on the current state of spring games, but you bring up DJ Lagway. Okay, so he didn't play. What is the latest on him, buddy, moving forward going into the fall?
Yeah, I mean, if you believe what Billy Napier says, he says that he should start throwing again soon and that he's 100% and that he'll be ready for fall. He said, when they kind of start their OTAs in June, that he'll be a full-on participant for that. So, we'll see. I did hear that he did start to throw a little bit in some practices, light work overall, and everybody I've talked to said that it was just simply needing rest and to recover a little bit. Why? Nobody will give you a straight answer on that as to why it took this long and why it wasn't December 20th through March 1st enough rest. But everyone, and including Billy Napier on Saturday, said that he'll be a full go when they start their OTAs in June, and that he'll start throwing soon, and that he's 100%. So, you have to take it for that. Again, we've heard nothing that says that he won't be. So, yeah, I mean, it was not handled properly, Mark, and if it was a simple situation of needing rest, I'm not sure why Napier made such a big deal. When he made a big deal about it, it had all these, reports coming out there and, different things of wanting to find out what was exactly wrong. You heard some people say he needs surgery. Everybody was looking for a witch hunt, and that was that. And so it was handled poorly. Hopefully now it's handled right and DJ's able to go. After watching Saturday, if DJ Lagway's not able to go, Mark, you and I may be talking about a short list to replace Billy Napier.
Who are the backup quarterbacks behind DJ Lagway that you did see this weekend?
Yeah, you've seen walk-on Aiden Werner and the seventh-year transfer in and Harrison Bailey. You were able to see a little bit of Tramel Jones as well. But, if Florida's going to Aiden Werner or Harrison Bailey and expecting to, succeed in the SEC, it's trouble. I mean, remember, Aiden Werner is a guy that had to come in the Georgia game and then in the Texas game and did not look good at all. I mean, he's a walk-on, and he is a really good kid, a really good practice player, but does not need to be there. Again, Harrison Bailey's in his seventh year of college. If he was worth anything, he would be in the NFL by now. So, it's tough because you're not able to recruit a quarterback or go land a quarterback in the transfer portal who is good enough to be starting in the SEC because they do know they're going to sit behind DJ Lagway, yeah. But at the same time, you don't have any experience behind DJ. You're talking about a guy in Tramel that they recruited. He's a guy who missed, all but 2.5 games of his senior year, so he's still recovering, and then you had to go get a seventh-year guy in a walk-on. So tough spot to be in, but not a good spot to be in.
Okay, you bring up those wide receivers. What did you see at the orange and blue debut this past Saturday that you liked from the Gator receiver core?
Dallas Wilson's a stud. I think Billy Napier had the quote that said he was that's what a 5-star looks like. And that's exactly what it was. I mean, absolutely, just a stud. Tied the orange and blue game record for receiving yards over there. Looked like a stud. I mean, physically he looks like a guy who's been in college 3 years, and then his ability is just spectacular. Really, really good player there. You had Vernell Brown, the third son of Vernell. He looked good as well. I think he had 4 catches in the game. Had a couple that were close to being scores. He looked really good. And, a guy that didn't score and didn't get much was J. Michael Sturdivant, the transfer in from UCLA. He only had 1 catch in the game, but you can see the reason everyone loves him. His ability and his just absolute speed and physicality is going to be really good on the deep balls. And if you talk to people, he had a great spring as well. And a guy that maybe didn't have the biggest game, but I think showed glimpses of just how good he can be is, redshirt freshman Tank Hawkins. Had a touchdown in the game, but his speed on special teams and stuff is electric. This is a team that is really, really good with receivers. They're going to have so many guys that can go make plays in this game that they're going to have trouble finding enough footballs to go around.
Is this the most excited you are for the Gators offense in a long time since you've been doing this?
Yes, if DJ Lagway's 100%. If DJ's. Because I think DJ is that good that with his ability this running game is pretty good. I mean, listen, we're talking about a guy in Jacoby Jackson at running back who had 198 yards in the game. He broke away on a 90-yard touchdown. And he looked really good last year before he got banged up a little bit. Him and Jaden Ball together are going to be really good. But if DJ's healthy, like we think DJ's going to be, with this receiving core and a running back group that is pretty good as well, this is a team that can score a lot of points and do really well. Now, the X factor is this, and that is Billy Napier is still calling plays, and Billy Napier still has those drives in the games where it's like, okay, what is this? Where did this come from? That was boring. But if DJ's healthy, this offense is going to be really, really good.
Defense, I don't know. It's a spring game. What did you take out of that side of the ball?
Well, I mean, obviously this game, and it was set up to be, an offensive showcase.
Yeah.
What was it under Will Muschamp when it was, a low-scoring game and everybody was, screaming and crying and mad and, wondering how good the offense is. Well, the offense sucked, but the defense was really good as well, and people didn't like that. So this game is set up for that. I mean, they don't blitz as much in this game. The quarterback can't be touched. So, it's tough on that side. But two freshmen really stood out to me. Drake Stubbs, he had an interception in the game. He's the five-star safety guy that I think is going to play a lot next year. He looked really good. And then that freshman linebacker, Ty Jackson, he had a couple big hits in goal line situations on the running backs there. So those two guys, to me, look really, really good. Overall, in the spring, we've heard really good things about the defensive line. DeAndre Robinson has looked good this year. Jaden Woods, the freshman that came in out of Kansas, that Florida flip late from Penn State, he's looked really good. L.J. McCray has looked really good this spring. So, you've heard some positive reports out of the defensive line this spring overall. But, in the game, it's just tough because of how it's set up to be. But those two freshmen, Stubbs and Jackson, to me, look really, really good in the game.
How did the Gator basketball team do at halftime when they were being celebrated there at the Swamp?
That was fantastic, but also disrespect. And I say this because you didn't get the same feeling in the Swamp as if you'd had it in the O-Dome. I remember the Noah celebration, that championship team, that back-to-back team, where they had the O-Dome celebration, and it was absolutely loud, chaotic, the dropping of the basketball, the fake dropping of the basketball, that kind of stuff. And, so a couple of the basketball team was, they were upset. Michael Hanlockton went on social media, upset about it. And, I do think it was a little bit of a publicity stunt to sell out the spring game or to get as many people in the spring game as possible by having this celebration at halftime. It looked thrown together. It looked like it was something that was thrown together at the last minute. And, but, all in all, great to celebrate those guys. And, it definitely seemed like those guys did enjoy it. I know the fans enjoyed it. It was an opportunity for more fans to see it than if it would have been in the O-Dome. Good to see Walter Clayton, Todd Golden, and those guys, and celebrating one last time. I mean, again, one of the best teams to ever play ball at the University of Florida.
Wait. What was the celebration like? Was that last Tuesday, Andrew? What was that like?
You talking about the welcome home celebration?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that was short and sweet, but that was loud too. I mean, that was was awesome. I mean, you had the fans. I believe someone said they got there like 8:00 to get at the front. So that was awesome. I mean, that was really cool to see. That the fans come out and cheer them on as they got back. The guys, some of the team members even admitted they were like, we didn't sleep. From the night before to getting on the plane and coming back, they never had slept because they had the big party in the on the river in San Antonio after the national championship on Monday in San Antonio. So it was cool to see. I mean, it was loud. The fans were there. It was a great welcome home for these guys, and I just think that moment right there was cool because it was guys just getting off the plane, coming straight there, and getting to see the reaction and see just how big of the support was. That part was cool.
Okay, Andrew Spivey, Gator Country. It was 7 days ago. Where did you watch the championship game last Monday night?
I watched it at home. I watched it at home, and it was. I mean, you look back on it, and I think everybody says this when teams win championships, but you look back on it and you're like, wow. And the longer it goes afterwards, the more you appreciate the run. You get caught up in the run. You get caught up in the. You've been covering this team since October. You get caught up in it. And then you kind of step back and you step back and you look at things, and it's like, wow, like this team really was that good. You really step back and you think about some of the shots Walter Clayton made. This team was good. It started from day one when they were undefeated in the non-conference, and everybody said, oh, well, their non-conference schedule wasn't as good as Auburn's or wasn't as good as Alabama's.
I have watched the last 2 minutes of that title game about 5 times now. I still don't believe it. Let me just say this. I know I've said this to death. In the last 2 minutes of that basketball game, no one scored a basket. There were 3 free throw shots that were made by the Gators, and that's how they got the lead, and that's how they won. If I would have told you that Monday morning before the game, what would you have told me, Andrew?
Probably not good for Florida, because, you think about Florida, they're the offensive aggressive team there, and Houston was the defensive team there. And, I'm going to be honest with you, Mark, until you just said that, I really didn't even think about that.
No,
I really didn't, because you get so caught up in the game. And the thing is it was so much that went on in those last 2 minutes. From the turnover, from Will Richard knocking the ball off of Houston's knee, to the Condon play at the end of the game. There was so much that went on in that last 2 minutes of the game that you do forget about that. And now that you say that and I think about it, yeah, I remember that, but I haven't even thought about it. It was crazy. We have a group text going at Gator Country, and myself and Nick Marcinko and Gentry Hall, we were all talking about it, and I said when Clayton hit the layup and the and one,
yeah,
I said this game's over with. Well, then Houston came back and went on a quick 4-0 run, and I was like, all right, maybe this is Houston's night after all. But then it was Walter finally, was Walter, and that game was such high emotions of up and down fields in that game that anybody who says Cinderellas need to happen in March Madness to make March Madness great, watch this Final Four national championship this year.
It's a great point. You bring up Richard. Man, his 14 points in the first half were gigantic, where no one else could score, and he started hitting these threes. That was big. I mean, the defense, the last couple minutes, championship level, and they got it done. And I'll just end with this with you. When they won the Gators at the buzzer, I didn't like fist pump or like a cheer. It was more like relief, like they survived. How did you feel at the end of that game?
Happy, for these guys, I go back to this, and I remember talking to Walter Clayton, when he was getting recruited for football and stuff. And, then I remember having to cover the Todd Golden allegations. And, again, I don't want to get into all that, whether it's true, not true, whatever. That's a legal process. But you think about all of that, and you're happy for these guys. I was happy to have been able to cover a national championship for a change. I've been able to cover softball, but not a football one, and not a basketball one, obviously baseball, softball. But this one was big, and, I was happy for these guys, and I was just glad to see these guys in this program get back to where they needed to be, and where they wanted to be. And, this was a team that was so good through the SEC schedule that it was like, you kept hearing people say, and I think me and you talked about it a little bit on the air a couple of weeks ago, and that was, would it be okay if they lost in the Sweet 16? Would it be okay if they lost in the Elite Eight? And, my answer kept being, it'll be all right, but it won't be successful. And that was just because this team was that good. And also, when you look back at this, Walter Clayton was a 0-star recruit in basketball. These guys were just, Belmont was where Will Richard came from. These guys were just from all over the place. They were not anybody but a great team. And, I was just really happy for these guys. I was pumped to see it. It was awesome.
Andrew Spivey, Gator Country. Yeah, follow him for the latest on Gator recruiting. I know spring practice now wrapped up. He'll have recap stuff for that. And, yeah, he's going to go over the latest on basketball moving forward because now they got to rebuild the team. Andrew Spivey, Gator Country, thank you so much for your help and have a great day.
Absolutely, Mark. Take care, buddy.